United Airlines Flight 232, Part 1, The Impossible Failure. At 37,000 feet, something happens that every aviation engineer believed was virtually impossible. Not one hydraulic system fails, not two. All three fail at exactly the same moment. In less than a second, the cockpit loses almost every control needed to fly the airplane. No steering, no rudder, no elevators, no ailerons, no flaps, no way to command the aircraft where the pilots want it to go. And there are 296 people on board. According to the aircraft's design, this shouldn't be possible, because this airplane was built with three completely separate backup hydraulic systems. The odds of losing all three had been estimated at roughly 1 in a billion. Yet somehow, every backup is gone. The aircraft begins drifting through the sky, responding to almost nothing the crew does. On paper, this airplane is no longer flyable. Then something unexpected happens. An off-duty pilot sitting in first class stands up and walks toward the cockpit. What these four men do over the next 44 minutes becomes one of the most extraordinary battles for survival in aviation history, and investigators would later discover that the disaster wasn't caused by a lack of backups. It was caused by a backup system that wasn't truly independent at all. A hidden weakness nobody expected, and a flaw buried inside a piece of titanium smaller than a coin. A flaw that escaped inspection after inspection for nearly 18 years. This is the true story of United Airlines Flight 232. But before we get to the explosion, you need to understand why everyone believed this accident could never happen in the first place. July 19th, 1989. United Airlines Flight 232 is operating a routine route from Denver to Chicago before continuing on to Philadelphia. On board are 285 passengers and 11 crew members. Among them are 52 children traveling under United's Children's Day promotion. For Captain Al Haynes, it's just another ordinary Wednesday. The weather is good. The aircraft is performing normally. Nothing seems unusual. For more than an hour after departure, the flight continues exactly as planned. Passengers read newspapers. Flight attendants serve drinks. Children look out the windows at the clouds below. Inside the cockpit, Captain Haynes, First Officer Bill Records, and Flight Engineer Dudley Dvorak are relaxed. After decades of flying experience, this feels like any other flight. A few rows behind the cockpit, another experienced pilot is sitting in first class. His name is Denny Fitch. He's off duty, just another passenger heading home. Neither he nor the flight crew realize how important his presence is about to become. And deep inside the aircraft's tail-mounted engine, a microscopic defect has finally reached its breaking point. For nearly 18 years, a tiny crack hidden inside a titanium fan disc has been growing. Invisible, undetected, waiting. Every flight cycle makes it slightly larger. Every takeoff, every landing, every engine start. The crack continues spreading through the metal, then suddenly, at 37,000 feet, the waiting ends. A deafening explosion rips through the tail of the aircraft. Passengers hear what sounds like a bomb. The entire airplane shudders violently. Overhead bins rattle. People grab their armrests. The aircraft immediately begins rolling to the right. Inside the cockpit, warning lights illuminate across the instrument panel. Captain Haynes and Bill Records instinctively grab the controls, but something is wrong. The airplane isn't responding. Haynes pulls on the control column. Almost nothing happens. Records attempts corrections. Nothing. The aircraft continues drifting. Then they look down at the hydraulic gauges. One reads 0, then another, then another. All three hydraulic systems are gone. In that moment, the crew realizes they are facing something no training program had ever prepared them for. To understand why this is so catastrophic, you need to understand how a DC-10 actually flies. Modern airliners are far too large for pilots to move flight control surfaces directly. Instead, hydraulic systems do the work. When pilots move the controls, pressurized hydraulic fluid moves the rudder, elevators, ailerons, spoilers, and other flight control surfaces. Without hydraulic pressure, most of those controls become useless. That's why engineers built redundancy into the aircraft. Not one hydraulic system, not two. 3 completely separate systems. If one failed, 2 remained. If 2 failed, 1 remained. The aircraft would still be controllable. That was the entire purpose of the design. Engineers calculated the odds of losing all three systems simultaneously at roughly 1 in a billion. For practical purposes, many believed it could never happen. But there was one detail almost nobody had considered. Although the systems were technically separate, critical portions of all three hydraulic lines passed through the same narrow section of the tail, right next to the engine. The very engine that had just exploded. When the fan disc disintegrated, thousands of pieces of metal shrapnel blasted outward at incredible speed. Those fragments sliced through all three hydraulic systems in a fraction of a second. Every backup disappeared instantly. The systems were independent on paper, but not in reality. A 1 in a billion event had just become reality because the backups were never truly separated. Back in the cockpit, the aircraft continues fighting itself. Climbing, dropping, rolling, drifting. The crew desperately searches for anything that still works. Then they notice something unusual. The engines are still responding. Captain Haynes experiments, reducing power on one engine, increasing power on the other. The airplane reacts slightly. Not much, but enough. For the first time since the explosion, they have some way to influence the aircraft's direction. It's crude, slow, and dangerously imprecise, but it's something. The crew immediately declares a full emergency. Air traffic controllers scramble to help. This isn't a normal emergency. By every engineering standard, this airplane should already be uncontrollable. As controllers begin searching for an airport, Flight 232 develops a terrifying rhythm. The nose rises, the aircraft slows, then it drops. Speed increases, the nose rises again, over and over. Each cycle sends the aircraft climbing and descending thousands of feet. Pilots call this a phagoid cycle. Normally, it's a textbook concept. For Flight 232, it's becoming a matter of life and death. Meanwhile, in first class, Denny Fitch feels the unusual motions and immediately realizes something is seriously wrong. He identifies himself to a flight attendant and sends a message to the cockpit. He's a DC-10 instructor pilot. If they need help, he's available. Captain Haynes doesn't hesitate. The answer comes back immediately. Yes. Get up here. Fitch enters the cockpit and instantly understands the seriousness of the situation. Hydraulics are gone. Flight controls are almost useless. And the aircraft is barely remaining stable. Many captains might have hesitated to share responsibility during a crisis. Haynes does the opposite. Looking at Fitch, he says 3 simple words. I need help. Those words would later become one of aviation's most famous examples of leadership under pressure. No ego, no pride, just teamwork. The crew quickly develops a plan. Haynes and records focus on maintaining whatever control remains. Dvorak handles systems and communications. Fitch takes control of the throttles. Soon he's kneeling between the pilots with one hand on each throttle lever. Using engine thrust alone, he begins steering the airplane. More power on the left engine pushes the aircraft one way. More power on the right pushes it the other. Tiny adjustments, constant corrections. Flying a commercial jet with engines instead of flight controls sounds impossible. Yet somehow, it's working. Not perfectly, but enough to keep the aircraft pointed toward Sioux City. For the next 40 minutes, 4 men fight a battle no simulator had ever prepared them for. Every correction matters. Every decision matters. Every second matters. Eventually, Sioux Gateway Airport appears ahead, but reaching the runway is only half the problem. Without hydraulics, the flaps cannot extend. Without flaps, the aircraft cannot slow down normally. The DC-10 is approaching far too fast, far too high, and descending far too quickly. The crew knows a normal landing is impossible. At best, they are attempting a controlled crash. Dvorak manually deploys the landing gear using the emergency system. Gravity drops the gear into place, one of the few systems still functioning. Outside, emergency vehicles line the runway. Firefighters prepare for the worst. Most people watching do not expect this airplane to land in one piece. Inside the cockpit, nobody gives up. The runway grows larger. The aircraft continues descending. Too steep, too fast, too unstable. Every second requires another correction, another throttle movement, another desperate attempt to keep the aircraft aligned. Then, moments before touchdown, something changes. The right wing begins dropping. Slowly at first, then faster. The nose starts pitching downward. The aircraft begins slipping away from the crew. After 44 minutes of fighting the impossible, Flight 232 is now only seconds from impact. To be continued. After 44 minutes of fighting an airplane that should have been impossible to fly, Flight 232 is now only seconds from impact. The runway fills the cockpit windows. The aircraft is still moving too fast, still descending too steeply, and still responding only partially to the crew's desperate corrections. Inside the cockpit, nobody speaks about survival anymore. Everyone is focused on one thing: keeping the airplane under control for just a few more seconds. Then suddenly, the right wing begins dropping faster. The nose pitches downward. The aircraft starts rolling away from the runway centerline. The crew immediately recognizes the danger. If the bank angle continues increasing, they may lose what little control they still have. Denny Fitch reacts instantly. He pushes both throttles forward. Maximum power. It's a desperate attempt to level the aircraft before impact. But there isn't enough time. The runway is already there. The right wing strikes first. Metal screams across the pavement. The wing tears apart. The aircraft violently yaws sideways. Then the DC-10 slams into the runway. The impact is catastrophic. The airplane breaks apart. Sections of the fuselage separate instantly. The tail tears away. A massive fireball erupts across the airfield. Debris scatters across the runway and into nearby fields. The aircraft cartwheels through a cloud of smoke, dirt, and burning fuel. For a few horrifying moments, nobody knows how many people have survived. Emergency crews rush toward the wreckage. Firefighters attack the flames. Paramedics search through twisted metal. Rescuers pull passengers from broken sections of the fuselage. Some survivors walk away. Others crawl through openings in the wreckage. Many are carried out by first responders. The scene is chaotic, but amid the destruction, something extraordinary becomes clear. People are alive. A lot of people. When the final numbers are counted, the results shock investigators. Of the 296 people on board, 185 survive. 111 do not. The loss of life is heartbreaking. Among those lost are several children traveling on the special promotion. Families are devastated. Communities mourn. But experts quickly realize something remarkable. By every engineering expectation, this accident should have been unsurvivable. Many believe there should have been no survivors at all. Yet, 185 people made it home. And the reason is simple. For 44 minutes, 4 men refused to stop fighting. In the days that follow, investigators arrive in Sioux City, determined to answer a critical question. What actually happened? Why did the aircraft lose all 3 hydraulic systems? And what caused the engine to explode in the first place? The investigation becomes one of the most important in modern aviation history. Teams begin recovering wreckage from miles around the crash site. Every fragment matters. Every piece tells part of the story. Then, months later, investigators receive an unexpected breakthrough. A farmer discovers a large piece of metal in a cornfield many miles away from Sioux City. The fragment is quickly identified as part of the engine's fan disc, the very component that failed at 37,000 feet. Now, investigators finally have the evidence they need. Metallurgists begin examining the damaged metal. What they discover is astonishing. The disaster began with an incredibly small defect, a microscopic imperfection trapped inside the titanium during manufacturing. Engineers call it a hard alpha inclusion. The defect was tiny, smaller than a grain of rice, but it created a weak point inside one of the most heavily stressed components in the engine. Every time the engine spun up, tiny amounts of stress concentrated around that flaw. Year after year, flight after flight. The crack slowly grew, invisible to everyone operating the aircraft, invisible to the passengers, invisible even to maintenance crews. And eventually, after nearly 18 years of service, the crack reached a critical size. The fan disc could no longer withstand the forces acting upon it. When it failed, it exploded with tremendous energy. The resulting shrapnel destroyed the aircraft's hydraulic systems and triggered the chain of events that followed. But investigators aren't finished, because another question remains. Why wasn't the crack discovered earlier? The component had been inspected multiple times. In fact, it had undergone several maintenance inspections during its life. The crack should have been detected. Yet, somehow, it wasn't. Investigators determined that the problem wasn't simply one missed inspection. The problem was the inspection process itself. The methods being used were not reliable enough to identify certain hidden defects. The system contained weaknesses. Weaknesses nobody fully appreciated until Flight 232 exposed them. And then, investigators uncover something even more important. The engine failure alone should not have doomed the aircraft. Airliners are designed around the concept of redundancy. Things fail. That's expected. Which is why backup systems exist. The DC-10 had 3 separate hydraulic systems, specifically to prevent a single failure from causing total loss of control. So why did all 3 disappear? The answer reveals one of the most important lessons in aviation safety. Although the systems were technically independent, they shared a critical vulnerability. All 3 hydraulic lines passed through the same section of the tail. A single point of failure. When the fan disc exploded, shrapnel entered that exact area. And in a fraction of a second, all 3 hydraulic systems were severed. The backups existed, but they were vulnerable to the same threat. The systems were independent on paper, not in reality. That finding changes everything, because it means the crash was not simply the result of bad luck. It exposed a design weakness that could be fixed. And after Flight 232, the aviation industry moves quickly. Hydraulic systems receive additional protection. Design standards are updated. Engine containment requirements become stricter. Inspection procedures become more advanced. Ultrasonic testing methods improve significantly. Manufacturing standards for titanium components become more rigorous. Across the industry, engineers begin searching for hidden single points of failure in other aircraft systems. The lessons learned from Flight 232 spread far beyond the DC-10. But perhaps the most important legacy of Flight 232 has nothing to do with hydraulics, nothing to do with engines, and nothing to do with titanium. It has to do with people. Specifically, the way people work together during a crisis. Throughout the emergency, Captain Al Haynes demonstrated something extraordinary. He listened. He delegated. He trusted his crew. And perhaps most importantly, he asked for help. When Denny Fitch entered the cockpit, Haynes didn't worry about rank. He didn't worry about pride. He didn't try to solve everything alone. Instead, He recognized that another experienced pilot could help save lives, and he welcomed that help immediately. Today, aviation professionals point to Flight 232 as one of the greatest examples of crew resource management ever recorded. The idea is simple. In a crisis, the best crews share information, share responsibility, and use every available resource. No single person has all the answers, but a team working together can overcome challenges that seem impossible. The actions of Haynes, Records, Dvorak, and Fitch became a model studied by pilots around the world. Their decisions continue influencing flight training decades later. Captain Al Haynes spent years speaking about the lessons of Flight 232. Not about heroism, not about luck, but about teamwork, humility, and the willingness to ask for help when it matters most. Denny Fitch never considered himself a hero. He simply said he was a pilot, doing his job on the worst day of his life. 185 people made it home because 4 men refused to give up. And decades later, every passenger who steps onto a modern airliner benefits from the lessons learned that day. United Airlines Flight 232 remains one of the most extraordinary stories in aviation history. A story of engineering failure, a story of human resilience, and a story of a crew that accomplished something many experts believed was impossible. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of aviation's most remarkable survival stories, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation. And let me know down in the comments what part of Flight 232 surprised you the most. The engine failure, the loss of all 3 hydraulic systems, or the incredible teamwork inside the cockpit. If you found this story fascinating, share it with someone who loves aviation history, because stories like this deserve to be remembered.
We are cleared for departure.
Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.